When the stars fall, we answer. They told us that missing persons reports are just that, missing. But sometimes, when the sky goes dark and the stars don't come out, what is truly missing isn't a person, but an entire fragment of reality that we're sworn to protect from whatever decided to take it. The asphalt of the county road shimmered under the strained glow of Officer Anya Sharma's headlights. It was a Tuesday, the kind that bled into Wednesday without much fanfare, a slow burn of routine punctuated by the occasional fender bender or barking dog complaint. Tonight, however, felt different. Not in an overtly alarming way, but a subtle disquiet settled over the air like a damp blanket. The stars, usually a predictable tapestry against the inky canvas of the rural sky, were conspicuously absent. Not obscured by clouds, not veiled by light pollution, simply gone. It was a detail noted by the old-timers, woven into hushed whispers about unlucky nights and strange omens, a folklore Sharma had always filed away under local color. Her patrol car, a standard-issue cruiser with a few more miles than her last, hummed a steady, monotonous tune. Sharma adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her own reflection-sharp features, eyes that had seen their share of the grim realities of the job, pulled back into a no-nonsense ponytail. She was a law enforcement professional, first and foremost. Duty was the compass, even when the terrain shifted beyond the predictable maps of human malice. Protecting the public, her fellow officers, that was the unwavering code. A ping on her radio jolted her from Rifat's. Dispatch to Unit 7, acknowledged. Sharma tapped the transmit button. Unit 7, go ahead. We have a 999 call, possible trespassing at the old Blackwood Observatory. Caller reported unusual lights and sounds originating from the main dome. Units en route, but for now, it's just you in the vicinity, Sharma. Proceed with caution. Blackwood Observatory. It had been derelict for at least 15 years, a skeletal silhouette against the horizon on clear nights, a local haunt for teenage dares and urban explorers. Unusual lights and sounds, though. That warranted a look. Acknowledged, dispatch. Heading to Blackwood. ETA 5 minutes. She toggled her headlights from low to high beam, the twin shafts cutting a more aggressive sway through the darkness. The absence of stars felt more pronounced as she drove deeper into the county's less populated zones. It was more than just a visual void, it was a sensory deprivation that prickled at the edges of her awareness. Even the crickets seemed to have fallen silent. The folklore she'd dismissed earlier began to feel less like quaint superstition and more like a forgotten warning. As the observatory's weathered, copper-domed structure loomed into view, Sharma killed her headlights. The dome was indeed illuminated, not with the steady beam of a security light, but with intermittent, pulsing flashes of an unnatural, cool blue. It wasn't the warm flicker of a generator or the harsh glare of a spotlight. This was something else. She pulled her cruiser onto the gravel access road, the crunch of stones under the tires a jarring sound in the profound silence. She exited the vehicle, her hand instinctively resting on the butt of her service weapon. The air grew colder, a sharp, unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the temperate evening. The blue lights pulsed, each one seeming to emanate from the very center of the dome, painting fleeting, ghostly patterns on the surrounding decaying dullings. There was a low, resonant hum now, not the mechanical thrum of machinery, but a deep, almost organic vibration that seemed to resonate within her bones. It was a sound that hinted at immense power, contained but not entirely controlled. Sharma raised her comms unit, the static crackle surprisingly loud in the quiet. Dispatch, Unit 7 on scene at Blackwood Observatory. Lights confirmed, blue, pulsing. Visual on the dome itself. Requesting immediate backup and possibly a containment team. This is not a typical trespassing call. Sharma crept forward, her flashlight beam cutting a nervous path through the oppressive gloom. The main entrance to the observatory building hung ajar, a dark maw inviting further investigation. No splintered wood, no jimmied locks, just an unnatural stillness, as if the door had simply yielded to an unseen hand. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust, decay, and something else, something metallic and sharp, like ozone after a lightning strike. Dust motes danced in the beam of her light, undisturbed by any recent activity. It was a scene of disarray, not of violence. Papers were scattered across consoles and workbenches, technical diagrams lay ripped and strewn, and what looked like a large, ornate astrolabe had been knocked from its moorings, lying askew on the floor. Yet, there were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture that suggested a physical altercation. It was as if a localized, powerful force had simply rearranged things. Her attention was drawn to the colossal telescope dominating the center of the main chamber, its massive lens pointed towards the void where stars should have been. A low, rhythmic hum emanated from its base, a sound that vibrated more than it was heard. Interspersed with this drone was a steady, piercing static, like 1,000 radio stations trying to broadcast through the same channel, but amplified to an unbearable degree. It wasn't a random noise, there was a pattern to it, a cadence that felt eerily deliberate, almost like a language struggling to form. Sharma instinctively reached for her sidearm, then paused, the sheer alien nature of the sound making her hesitate. This wasn't the screech of a faulty mechanism, this was something far more profound. She activated her comms unit, keeping her voice low and steady, a professional reflex against the rising tide of unease. Dispatch, Unit 7. I'm inside the Blackwood Observatory. The scene is unusual. No signs of forced entry, but significant disarray. The main telescope is active, emitting a strong static signal and an ambient hum. I'm picking up something on my comms, a transmission, but it's heavily distorted. She pressed the receive button, hoping to capture a cleaner sample. What came through was not just static. Beneath the overwhelming hiss, there were fleeting fragments of sound, distorted and alien. Guttural clicks, whistling tones that seemed to bend and warp, and something that sounded disturbingly like distorted human speech, warped beyond recognition, yet carrying an undeniable urgency. It was a cacophony of the unknown, a torrent of information that her mind could not process, but her instincts screamed was important. It felt like eavesdropping on a conversation spoken in a language that existed before words, a raw transmission of intent rather than meaning. Sharma felt a cold dread creep up her spine. This wasn't a trespasser. This wasn't even a human threat. The rhythmic static, the warped vocalizations, the sheer palpable rawness of the atmosphere, it all pointed to something far beyond her training, far beyond the established parameters of her world. She tried to isolate a segment, hoping to filter out the interference, but the garbled sound seemed to resist any attempt at clarification, shifting and reforming with each pass. It was a whisper from the void, a broken message from a place she couldn't comprehend, and it was deeply unsettling. Officer Sharma fumbled with her notepad, the pen feeling alien in her suddenly clammy hand. The fragmented transmission from the telescope had ceased, leaving an even more profound silence in its wake. She was trying to document the observatory state, the scattered papers, the overturned astrolabe, the pervasive scent of ozone, when the air itself seemed to shimmer. It began subtly, like heat haze rising from a summer road, but it intensified rapidly, localized directly above the observatory's dome. The shimmering coalesced, forming a wavering, translucent curtain of light that pulsed with the same unnatural blue she had seen earlier. And then, the static returned, not from the telescope this time, but from the very atmosphere. It was the same rhythmic, garbled noise, but amplified, a deafening wave that seemed to press in on her from all sides. Her comms unit, still clutched in her hand, erupted in a cacophony of distorted sound, far worse than before. It was as if the observatory itself was attempting to speak, to broadcast its unseen turmoil. Sharma instinctively shielded her eyes as the distortion intensified, the blue light flaring with an almost violent intensity. A blinding white flash followed, obliterating her vision and momentarily deafening her. It felt like being submerged in pure light, an experience that bypassed her optic nerves and seared directly into her consciousness. Her grip tightened on her sidearm, the familiar weight a small anchor in the overwhelming sensory overload. For a heart-stopping moment, she felt utterly disconnected from reality, suspended in a void of pure energy. Then, as abruptly as it began, it ended. The light receded, leaving behind a phantom ache behind her eyes and a ringing in her ears. The static vanished, and the oppressive hum from the telescope died down to a barely perceptible thrum. Sharma lowered her hands, blinking rapidly as her vision slowly returned, the familiar contours of the observatory grounds reasserting themselves. The air still crackled with residual energy, and the metallic scent was stronger than ever, but the immediate, overwhelming distortion had passed. Her gaze swept across the area, meticulously cataloging the aftermath. The sky above was still a starless void, an unsettling backdrop to the scene. Then, her flashlight beam caught something near the edge of the treeline, a few yards from the observatory's outer wall. It was small, no larger than a shoebox, and unnervingly smooth. It rested on the dew-kissed grass, reflecting the faint ambient light with a dull, obsidian sheen. Sharma approached it cautiously, her boot crunching on fallen leaves. The object was perfectly ovoid, with no discernible seams, markings, or any indication of how it was constructed. Its surface was cool to the touch, not with the chill of the night, but with an intrinsic, alien coldness. There was a faint, almost imperceptible vibration emanating from it, a subtle tremor that echoed the hum she had heard earlier from the telescope. This was no piece of discarded equipment, no stray fragment of human endeavor. It radiated an undeniable otherness, a tangible piece of the inexplicable that had just manifested on her watch. The crackle of Sergeant David Cruz's approaching siren cut through the lingering hum of otherworldly quiet. Sharma watched his cruiser snake its way up the gravel path, its familiar red and blue lights flashing against the starless sky, a stark contrast to the ethereal blue shed witnessed earlier. Cruz was a man carved from granite and routine, a by-the-book supervisor who valued procedure and empirical evidence above all else. Sharma braced herself. Explaining this would be a challenge. Cruz emerged from his vehicle, his broad frame filling the doorway, his face a mask of practiced authority. He took in the scene, Sharma standing sentinel beside the treeline, the derelict observatory silhouetted against the dim light, and the decidedly odd, dark object resting innocently on the grass. His gaze lingered on the object, a flicker of professional curiosity briefly crossing his otherwise impassive features. "Sharma," he acknowledged, his voice a low rumble. "Dispatch said you were having an unusual night. What have we got here?" Sharma took a deep breath. "Sergeant. It's complicated. No forced entry. The interior is in disarray, but not from a struggle. The main telescope was active, broadcasting static. I received a garbled transmission, unlike anything I've ever heard. Then, there was a distortion. An atmospheric anomaly. A flash of light." She gestured towards the object. "And then this appeared. It wasn't here when I first arrived." Cruz's eyes narrowed, his gaze shifting from the object to Sharma. He walked deliberately towards the strange artifact, his heavy boots crunching on the grass. He circled it slowly, his expression hardening with each pass. "An atmospheric anomaly? A flash of light? Sharma, are you feeling all right? You've been on patrol for a while, maybe you're seeing things. This looks like some kind of discarded meteorological probe, maybe?" "Sergeant, with all due respect, this isn't a probe," Sharma insisted, her voice firm. "I felt it. The energy. The air was humming. And that transmission, it wasn't a random noise." She knelt beside the object, her flashlight beam illuminating its smooth, dark surface. "This object is cold. And there's still a faint vibration coming from it." Cruz scoffed, a short, sharp sound. "Vibration? Cold? It's a cool light, Sharma. And that hum you're hearing is probably residual from the old generator trying to kick in. Look, I'll admit it's an odd find, but let's stick to the facts. We'll bag it, tag it, and send it to the lab. They'll figure out what it is." He pulled out a pair of latex gloves from his uniform pocket. As he reached for the object, Sharma's personal comms unit, still active from her earlier attempt to record the transmission, suddenly emitted a faint, high-pitched whine. It wasn't static, but a pure, resonant tone that seemed to react to the object's presence. The readings on her comms unit, designed to pick up ambient electronic signals, began to spike erratically, displaying energy levels far beyond anything standard. "Sergeant, wait," Sharma said, holding up her comms unit. "My device is picking up significant energy readings. Off the charts. And that tone, it's reacting to the object." Cruz paused, his hand hovering inches from the dark sphere. He looked at the wildly fluctuating numbers on Sharma's device, then back at the object, a flicker of doubt finally crossing his features. The casual dismissal began to falter, replaced by a grudging acknowledgement of the impossible. The evidence, cold and silent, lay between them. The metallic tang in the air seemed to amplify the urgency of the situation. Cruz, his initial skepticism now visibly eroded, had secured the perimeter around the anomalous object while Sharma remained inside the observatory, her comms units still buzzing with residual energy signatures. It was during this tense standoff, the dark ovoid silent and inert on the dewy grass, that the priority channel on Sharma's comm crackled to life, not with the familiar voice of dispatch, but with a clipped, almost synthesized tone. Unit 7, Officer Sharma, respond. The voice was devoid of any inflection, devoid of humanity. It was a data stream, rendered into speech. Sharma's heart hammered against her ribs. This was not standard procedure. Unit 7 responding, she managed, her voice tighter than she intended. Sergeant Cruz, respond priority channel. Cruz's gruff voice echoed back, Cruz, responding. Effective immediately, designate Incident Blackwood 7 as Level Omega. Activate Contingency Plan Nightingale. All units involved are to maintain radio silence on all standard frequencies. Communications will be encrypted, simplex only. Repeat, simplex only. No external transmissions. Your current objective is containment and observation. Engagement is strictly prohibited unless threat assessment dictates otherwise. Do not approach the anomaly directly. Do not attempt to extract the artifact. The directive was delivered with chilling efficiency, each word precisely chosen, devoid of emotion or explanation. Level Omega. Contingency Plan Nightingale. These were terms Sharma had never encountered, buried deep within the labyrinthine binders of departmental regulations that no one ever expected to see enacted. They spoke of threats that transcended petty crime, of phenomena that required a response beyond the capabilities of local law enforcement. What is Level Omega, Sergeant? Sharma whispered, her eyes never leaving the dark object outside. Cruz's voice was tight. I don't know, Sharma. But it's bad. Nightingale, it's classified. Highly classified. Means we're dealing with something outside our usual purview. He scanned the horizon, as if expecting a fleet of alien ships to descend. We need to secure this area. No one in, no one out. The synthesized voice returned, cutting through their hushed exchange. Your secondary directive is to await further instructions from designated oversight. Intel suggests potential biological or technological signatures associated with the anomaly. Maintain passive observation. Record all sensory data. Any deviation from established protocols will be considered a breach of national security. Your primary duty remains the preservation of public order and officer safety. This directive supersedes all other standing orders. The message ended as abruptly as it began, leaving behind an unnerving silence broken only by the wind whistling through the observatory's skeletal frame. Sharma and Cruz exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement of the vast, unknown territory they had just stumbled into. They were no longer just law enforcement officers responding to a call, they were the first responders to an event that had clearly bypassed all conventional channels, a stark reminder that their duty often extended into realms far stranger and more perilous than any textbook could describe. Their mandate to protect the public had just expanded exponentially, encompassing a threat that had no precedent in their training or their experience. The stars, or the lack thereof, seemed to hold a new, ominous significance. The hours bled into one another, marked only by the shifting patterns of the dim, unnatural light emanating from the observatory dome. Sharma and Cruz maintained their vigil, a wary distance between them and the silent, obsidian artifact. The directives were clear: observe, record, and do not engage. Their comms units remained on the encrypted simplex channel, relaying fragmented observations to an unseen higher authority. The silence, however, was beginning to feel less like an absence of sound and more like a deliberate withholding, a prelude to something significant. It started subtly. A rustling in the dry underbrush beyond the perimeter fence, dismissed at first as wind. Then, a faint, pulsing glow began to appear amongst the weeds, small at first, easily mistaken for phosphorescence on decaying matter. But it grew, spreading outwards from the vicinity of the anomalous object like a silent tide. The plants themselves seemed to be changing. Leaves that had been brittle and brown now unfurled with an unnatural vibrancy, their veins glowing with a soft, internal light. The very air seemed to hum with a subtle, harmonizing frequency, a counterpoint to the earlier, harsher static. Sharma, her training reasserting itself amidst the bizarre, began meticulously documenting the changes. She used her tactical flashlight to illuminate the encroaching flora, its beams seeming to barely penetrate the soft luminescence that now bathed the observatory grounds. The plants were unlike anything she had ever seen in her botany courses or encountered on patrol. They had intricate, fractal-like patterns in their foliage, and their blossoms, which unfurled with astonishing speed, were not of any terrestrial hue. They pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic light, shifting between shades of sapphire and amethyst. Sergeant, Sharma's voice was a low murmur, betraying a hint of awe beneath her professional composure. "Look at this." Cruz, who had been pacing restlessly near his cruiser, moved closer. He stared, his mouth slightly agape, at a cluster of these alien flowers blooming near his boots. "What in God's name?" He reached out, as if to touch one, then pulled his hand back, remembering the directives. "They're alive. And glowing." The energy readings on Sharma's comms unit, which had stabilized after the initial burst, began to fluctuate again, mirroring the gentle pulse of the bioluminescent blooms. It was as if the plants were drawing power from the very anomaly they seemed to herald, or perhaps, the anomaly was using them as conduits. The soft, rhythmic light seemed to reach out, a silent invitation, or perhaps a subtle manipulation. The pervasive scent of ozone was slowly being replaced by a faint, sweet aroma, reminiscent of night-blooming jasmine, yet with an unfamiliar, otherworldly undertone. "This isn't natural," Cruz stated, the understatement hanging heavy in the air. His earlier skepticism was now a distant memory, replaced by a raw, professional concern. This was a developing situation, one that defied all conventional understanding. Sharma continued to record, her focus unwavering. She observed how the ambient temperature around the blooming flora seemed to be slightly elevated, a localized pocket of warmth in the cool night air. The plants weren't just growing, they were actively influencing their environment, altering energy fields, producing light, and emitting a distinct, unidentifiable fragrance. This wasn't a passive discovery, it was an active manifestation, a subtle but undeniable demonstration of the anomaly's expanding influence. The stars remained absent, but the ground beneath them was now aglow with a borrowed, ethereal luminescence, a silent testament to the forces at play. The pulsating glow of the alien flora cast long, distorted shadows across the observatory grounds, creating a surreal landscape that seemed to stretch beyond the confines of their isolated reality. Sharma, under the watchful, if increasingly concerned, eye of Sergeant Cruz, meticulously documented the spreading luminescence. Her comms unit, still passively monitoring energy fluctuations, registered subtle shifts that didn't align with any known geological or atmospheric phenomena. It was as if the very earth beneath them was subtly resonating with the object's presence. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7, acknowledge," Sharma said, her voice steady despite the unfolding strangeness. "Requesting access to archived local historical records. Specifically, any accounts of unusual celestial events or disappearances in this region, dating back at least 50 years, and any indigenous folklore pertaining to unusual sky phenomena." A prolonged silence followed, punctuated only by the faint hum of the active telescope and the rhythmic pulse of the alien blooms. Finally, a curt voice, distinct from their usual dispatcher, responded on the encrypted channel. "Access granted. Transmitting archival data to your primary comms unit. Compliance with Protocol Nightingale remains paramount. No external dissemination." The data streamed in, a torrent of scanned documents, digitized newspaper clippings, and scanned pages from ancient, brittle journals. Sharma began to sift through the information, her professional instincts kicking into overdrive. She cross-referenced dates, geographical markers, and descriptive details. What emerged was a chilling mosaic of forgotten incidents. There were faded newspaper articles detailing unexplained crop failures coinciding with periods of unusual atmospheric disturbance, and terse police reports from the 1970s documenting the vanishing of entire families from isolated homesteads with no trace left behind. One particular entry, a yellowed page from a local historian's unpublished manuscript, caught her eye. It spoke of a skystone that fell centuries ago, a harbinger of both great fortune and terrible loss, said to have drained the very life from the land and drawn people into a silent, starry abyss. The description of the skystone was vague, but the accompanying sketch, crude as it was, bore a disturbing resemblance to the obsidian ovoid resting on the grass. The manuscript also detailed a recurring pattern: periods of profound quiet in the sky, followed by localized seismic tremors and an inexplicable surge of energy that seemed to warp the very fabric of existence. As Sharma cross-referenced these historical accounts with the real-time energy readings from her comms unit, a disturbing correlation began to emerge. The subtle energy fluctuations she was recording now had a spectral signature that eerily matched the recorded seismic activity from decades past. The documented disappearances, once dismissed as isolated incidents of people getting lost in the wilderness or succumbing to the elements, now appeared to be part of a larger, more sinister pattern. These weren't random events, they were echoes, reverberations of something ancient and powerful that had visited this region before. Cruz, his face etched with a grim understanding, joined her. He pointed to a series of old town records, detailing a cluster of unexplained disappearances in the 1950s, all occurring within a 5-mile radius of the observatory. These weren't just people getting lost, Sharma, he stated, his voice low. There's something about this place. Something that repeats. The implications were staggering. The obsidian object wasn't an isolated anomaly, it was potentially a recurring phenomenon, a visitor that left behind a trail of eerie silence, devastating energy surges, and vanishing lives. The fallen stars of folklore weren't just myths, they were historical markers, evidence of incursions that had shaped the region's hidden history. Their duty to protect the public suddenly felt like a monumental, possibly futile, task against forces that had operated in the shadows for generations, leaving behind only hushed whispers and unanswered questions. The night had deepened, but the observatory grounds were no longer shrouded in darkness. The bioluminescent flora pulsed with a steady, synchronized rhythm, bathing the scene in an ethereal, otherworldly glow. Sharma and Cruz stood amidst this alien luminescence, their patrol car a starkly conventional anachronism against the encroaching strangeness. The obsidian artifact, undisturbed, continued to radiate its subtle, unnerving vibration. The weight of the classified directives pressed down on them, a heavy cloak of responsibility in the face of the incomprehensible. Their duty, once a clear path defined by statutes and precedent, now branched into a bewildering labyrinth of the unknown. So, Cruz began, his voice raspy, "What's the play here, Sharma?" "We've got this." He gestured vaguely at the glowing plants, the silent object, the starless sky. "And orders to do nothing. Just watch?" Sharma's gaze swept over the scene, her mind racing through possibilities, each more outlandish than the last. The historical accounts were a grim confirmation that this was not an isolated incident. This was a recurrence, a pattern etched into the very fabric of the region's forgotten history. We watch, Sergeant. We document. And we wait for Nightingale to give us the next step. She touched her comms unit, the faint, persistent energy readings a constant reminder of the unseen forces at play. But we also need to consider the public. If this continues, if it escalates, how do we explain this? How do we keep people safe without causing panic? The veil of normalcy, she realized, was thinner than she had ever imagined. Their job was to maintain it, to be the unseen guardians against the chaos that lay just beyond the edge of perception. But what happened when the chaos began to bloom, literally, in their own backyard? The thought of an uncontrolled disclosure, of mass hysteria or, worse, the exploitation of this anomaly by those with less than noble intentions, sent a shiver down her spine. Suddenly, the rhythmic pulsing of the flora intensified. The light flared, a wave of sapphire and amethyst washing over them. The hum from the artifact deepened, becoming a resonant thrum that vibrated through the very soles of their boots. The main telescope inside the observatory, which had been dormant since the initial burst of static, began to emit a faint, internal glow, its massive lens now directed not towards the void, but towards the silent, obsidian object on the ground. A new transmission crackled on their encrypted channel, not the synthesized voice from before, but a voice that was undeniably human, though strained and urgent. Nightingale actual to Blackwood 7. We have confirmation. The object is a beacon. It is drawing attention. Recommend immediate relocation of all personnel. Initiate Phase 2 protocols. Containment is compromised. Evacuate the primary site. Secure the artifact if possible, but do not risk direct engagement. Repeat, do not risk direct engagement. Phase 2? Cruz muttered, his eyes wide. What's Phase 2? Before Sharma could respond, a profound stillness descended. The pulsing of the flora ceased, the hum from the artifact abruptly cut off, and the glow from the telescope winked out. For a terrifying moment, the observatory grounds were plunged back into near-total darkness, save for the faint moonlight filtering through the clouds that had, inexplicably, begun to gather overhead. The starless sky now felt like a looming, pregnant pause. Then, from the direction of the observatory's main dome, a new sound emerged. Not static, not a hum, but a low, guttural exhalation, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of eons. It was a sound that implied presence, awareness, and intent. Sharma and Cruz drew their sidearms, their training kicking in, their years of service narrowing their focus to the immediate threat, however alien it might be. Their duty was clear, even in the face of an entity that defied every law of nature they knew. They were the guardians, tasked with holding the line, with ensuring that whatever had fallen from the sky, whatever had disturbed the ancient slumber, did not breach the fragile veil that separated the known from the utterly, terrifyingly unknown. The stars may have been absent from the sky that night, but the light that bloomed from the earth itself revealed a different kind of wonder, and a heavier kind of burden. Duty, we found, extends far beyond the visible spectrum, asking us to stand guard even when the threats are whispered on a cosmic wind. Sometimes, the most profound protection comes from simply bearing witness, and holding the line against the silence. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the unknown with Officers Sharma and Sergeant Cruz. As they faced the inexplicable, what would you have done differently in their shoes? Share your thoughts with us here at Dusty Whisper. Until our next transmission, may your patrols be peaceful. But if the stars ever vanish from your sky, remember the echoes in the static.